I used to believe that nothing could break the love between Mark and me. We had made it through 2 years of back-to-back shifts, rare weekend getaways, and even a miscarriage no one else knew about but us. And yet, at our rehearsal dinner, surrounded by candlelight, white roses, wine glasses, and over 40 of his closest friends and relatives, everything shattered with the soft chime of a wine glass. Ting! Haley, his sister, stood up, her makeup flawless, her voice sharp as steel. "I believe that ring on your finger doesn't belong to you. You stole it from our mother's safe before Dad could give it to me." My heart missed a beat. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. I looked at Mark, and he said nothing. No denial, no defense. Just a deep breath, and a look that said he wasn't sure I was innocent either. That's when I knew. It wasn't about Haley. It wasn't about the ring. It was about the test I never saw coming, and how the man I was about to marry failed it without a word. I took off the ring, laid it gently on the table beside my glass of water. The sound of metal against glass rang louder than the violin playing in the background. Then I stood up. No tears, no dramatic exit, just quiet steps, walking away from the evening I once dreamed would mark the beginning of forever. I heard Mark call my name behind me, but I didn't turn back, because sometimes silence is an answer, and in that moment it was the one that hurt the most. Mark and I met during one of those unexpected moments life throws at you, on a rainy March evening in the pediatric ER in Boston. I was the night shift lead nurse. He rushed in, carrying his 4-year-old nephew burning up with a fever. Even in the chaos, I still remember his eyes, worried, gentle, and full of gratitude, as I calmed the little boy and started an IV. Once things settled down, he walked up to the intake desk and asked me something I still remember word for word. "I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this, but would it be okay if I asked you out for a coffee sometime, when you're not out here saving lives?" We started with short conversations, then late-night coffee dates after my shifts, then long, warm weekends at my tiny apartment where he first told me he lost his mom at 17. According to Mark, she was the most remarkable woman he ever knew, strong, graceful, and full of integrity. He said every time he tried to be a better man, he was trying to live up to who she believed he could be. Our love wasn't loud. No grand gestures, no roses lining the hallway, no exotic vacations. But there was sharing. There were nights I came home after a 14-hour shift and collapsed into his arms. There were mornings when he made my coffee and scribbled little messages on the paper cup with a felt pen. After nearly 2 years together, Mark proposed on a chilly afternoon in Beacon Hill. The scene looked like a painting, the sunset casting gold over the brick streets, birds soaring through the sky, and the soft sound of a saxophone playing from somewhere far away. The ring he gave me was a vintage sapphire, framed with delicate diamonds. He said it was his mother's wedding ring. I cried, not just because of how beautiful it was, but because of what it meant. To me, it wasn't just a proposal. It was a welcome, an acknowledgement, a sign that I was part of his family now, or at least, I believed I was. I remember how carefully I wore that ring. I never let it touch hand sanitizer. I took it off before every shift and placed it in a velvet box. I didn't want to just treat it as jewelry. I wanted to honor it as a symbol of the past, of the woman who raised the man I loved. I even told Mark once, if we ever have a daughter, I want her to have this ring someday. He smiled, held my hand, and whispered, "Mom would be proud of you." I believed him. I believed in that family, and I believed that love could bridge anything, even class differences or ghosts from the past. But I forgot something. Love can't stand on one leg. If only one person is holding it up. If my love with Mark grew like a gentle song, then my relationship with his family was a clumsy tune, full of off-key notes and dissonance. I met his father, Donald, for the first time on Thanksgiving, about 6 months after we started dating. He was a retired businessman, once the head of a luxury hotel chain across the East Coast. At dinner, he asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Being a nurse, does that pay enough to live on?" I tried to smile, keeping it polite. "Well, enough to live decently, and to help people every day." He just said, then shifted the conversation to stocks. Mark's mother had passed years ago. His younger sister, Haley, 3 years his junior, made it clear from day one that she didn't like me. Haley was the kind of woman who could make you feel like an outsider with just one glance. She worked in PR in New York, dressed impeccably, spoke with an affected French-English accent, and always knew exactly which item on the menu was authentic. Whenever we met, Haley gave me that thin, polite smile. Not openly hostile, just cool, curated disdain, wrapped in social grace. Once, I brought a homemade apple pie to their house. Haley glanced at it and asked, "Where did you buy this? Looks very commercial." I forced a chuckle. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't say anything. I tried. I went to symphony concerts with them, even though I never liked classical music. I read Donald's memoir, a 400-page ode to mergers and acquisitions, and it took me 2 weeks to get halfway through. I chose safe dresses, classic cuts, neutral colors, as if I were auditioning to be accepted into the family. Whenever I told Mark I felt judged, like I didn't belong, he'd just say, "You're overthinking it. They'll warm up to you eventually." And I believed him. I thought if I just tried a little harder, stepped a little closer, the door would open. But some doors don't open. Not because you aren't good enough, but because the people inside never intended to invite you in. I remember one night, after Mark had fallen asleep, I sat up in bed just staring at my engagement ring. I found myself wondering, if his mother was still alive, would she see me differently? I never met her, but sometimes it felt like I was constantly being measured against a ghost, graceful, elegant, and forever part of that perfect, pedigreed family. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I'd felt like a guest from the very beginning, not a real part of the home. I just never expected that truth to be confirmed, so publicly, so viciously, in front of his entire family, on the night I thought would mark the start of our forever. I used to think that if I could endure the stares, the passive-aggressive remarks, and the long silences at family dinners, then maybe, just maybe, the rehearsal dinner would be the turning point. The moment they would finally see me as part of their family. I was wrong. The dinner was held in Charleston, at a riverside estate Mark said was the place where his parents had once gotten engaged. The setting looked like it had been torn from the pages of a luxury bridal magazine. Golden string lights hanging from ancient oaks, ivory tablecloths, crystal glasses, and vibrant dahlia centerpieces in tall vases. I wore a simple champagne silk dress, my hair swept up in a clean bun, makeup soft and respectful, not to show off, but to honor the significance of the night. I smiled when I saw Mark in his navy suit talking with his groomsmen. He walked over, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "You look stunning." Everything felt almost perfect. The dinner unfolded in laughter, toasts, warm conversations. For the first time in weeks, I felt light again, relieved. Maybe I'd been wrong, I thought. Maybe Haley just needed time. Maybe Mark's father would eventually accept me, the way he once accepted Mark's mother, who herself hadn't come from any prestigious background. And then a glass clinked. Haley stood up, wine in hand, smiling with that kind of sweetness that tastes like honey laced with cyanide. "If I may say a few words before my brother's big day." She paused, eyes fixed on me. "There's something I think everyone should know, especially since that ring," she pointed to my hand, "doesn't exactly belong to the bride." The room froze. I looked around, unsure if I'd heard her right. But Haley continued, calm, collected, cruel. "That ring, it was our mother's wedding ring. She kept it in her safe. After she passed, my father said he would save it. For me. But one day a word. Didn't stand up. Didn't interrupt her. He just stared down at his wine glass, like it might offer him a way out. The air was gone. The lights suddenly felt too bright. Cold sweat crept down my back. "Haley, that's enough," someone whispered. "This isn't the place," another voice added. But no one stopped her. And Mark, the one person who should have, didn't either. I don't remember much of what happened next, only that I took off the ring, the one I'd once worn with pride, thinking it symbolized love, and placed it gently on the table, right next to my untouched glass of water. Then I stood up, not out of anger, not to make a scene, but because I knew I couldn't stay another second. Mark called my name, but I didn't look back. I walked away. Through whispers, through pitiful stares, through the bitter smirk Haley hadn't even bothered to hide. And in my heart, one truth rang louder than anything else. If the man you're about to marry won't stand up for you, then he has no right to stand beside you. I don't remember how long I walked or where I was even going. All I remember, with piercing clarity, is this. No one came 15 minutes later. I didn't know Haley would say that. I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone. I thought I'd talk to her after, alone. But I didn't. Instead, I quietly opened the drawer beside the bed, slipped the phone inside and closed it. As a nurse, I'd learned early on, some wounds don't need to bleed to be real. Some injuries aren't visible, but they throb quietly under the skin, deeper and longer than any surface cut. And that night, I knew I was bleeding from the inside. No one could see it. No one heard me scream. But I knew something vital inside me had cracked wide open, red-rimmed eyes, unshaven, his hair a mess. He looked exhausted, uncomfortable, ashamed. I'm sorry, he said. Really? Haley had calm but distant. No, Mark. It's not chaos you were afraid of. You chose silence. He lowered his head. No excuses, no defense. I didn't take off that ring because I was angry, I continued, my voice trembling. I took it off because I realized if last night was the preview of our marriage, I hadn't picked up his calls, but still, he showed up unannounced while I was in. I should have done something, Rachel. That night, I should have stood up. I know. I stared at him for a long moment. Then why didn't you? He went quiet. His eyes dropped to the wooden floorboards beneath us, like the answer might be written in the grain. Wedding falling apart. I cut him off. And being afraid of losing me, that wasn't reason enough to stand up. It wasn't an accusation. It was a truth, bleeding, raw, and undeniable. Mark leaned back in his chair. His hands were clasped tightly, knuckles strained. I grew up in a house where silence was the answer to everything. When my mom was sad, she went quiet. When my dad was angry, he slammed the office door. I learned to endure, to suppress, to walk past it. But I'm not that family, Mark, I said, my voice even. I didn't need you to scream. I just needed to know that when someone disrespects me, you won't let me to Dad. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance. I stood up, walked into the room. I didn't close the door. He followed. I pointed to the sapphire ring he'd once given me. It lay still in its black velvet box, resting on the wooden bedside table, exactly where I'd left it the night everything fell apart. I wore it with my whole heart, believing it stood for something more than love, for trust, for protection. But that night, I realized it was just a piece of jewelry. Mark stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. I don't know if this can be fixed. I just know I can't marry someone I'm not sure will stand beside me when it matters. We stood there, in a room barely a step apart, and yet farther from each other than we'd ever been. He left soon after, quietly, just like he came. And when the door clicked shut behind him, I sank to the edge of the bed, holding myself together, trying to keep intact the last remnants of a trust that had already shattered. I don't know what comes next. All I know is this. Love, if it isn't brave enough to protect you, isn't strong enough to keep you. 3 days after that fateful rehearsal dinner, I received an email from an address I never expected to see in my personal inbox. Donald Bennett at Bennett Groupcom, Mark's father. The subject line was only 2 words, about the ring. My heart sank. A part of me didn't want to open it. Something inside whispered, if he's writing to you, it's either a warning or a final judgment. But when I clicked in, the very first line stopped me cold. Rachel, I don't usually interfere in my children's personal affairs, though others may believe otherwise. But after what happened, there's something I feel needs to be clarified. The engagement ring, it was never promised to Haley, and it was certainly never stolen. I had to read it twice to be sure I wasn't imagining it. The truth is, Mark's mother, Eleanor, left that ring to the woman our son chooses, her exact words in her personal handwritten will. She didn't just leave behind an object. She left a message that if Mark found someone worthy of his love, that ring would belong to her. I let go of the mouse, sat up straight. It felt like someone had reached back through time and rewound the clock, offering justice for something I thought was irreparably shattered. I once assumed Haley would receive it, simply because she was our daughter, but Eleanor made it clear. The ring wasn't meant for blood. It was meant for choice. And Mark chose you. Nothing was stolen. My hands began to tremble. All those sleepless nights, all the second-guessing stares, all the whispers behind my back, quieted by a few simple paragraphs from the very man I had believed stood entirely against me. But it was the final lines that struck the deepest chord. I can't undo what Haley said, but I can clarify what my wife believed. You never needed my family's approval to be worthy of love, but at the very least, I believe you deserve the truth. Sincerely, Donald Bennett. I printed the email, folded it carefully, tucked it inside the notebook I always carried on shift. As a quiet reminder, the truth may come late, but it is never meant to stay silent. I didn't reach out to Mark after that, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to return to a conversation that the other person still hadn't found the courage to start. The ring remained in its box, untouched. But now, when I looked at it, I didn't see betrayal anymore. I saw a woman, not me, but Mark's mother, who once believed that love was a choice. And I believe that too. I can choose to stay or to walk away. But whatever I choose, it will be built on truth, not fear, and never again on silence. I was about to check out of the hotel when my phone rang. A strange number, but the feeling familiar. I picked up. A woman's voice, cold but no longer sharp. "Rachel, it's me, Haley." I paused for a few seconds. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I need to talk to you, in person." I hesitated. "Do you think there's still anything left to say?" "Yes," Haley replied, quicker than I expected. "Not about the ring, about me." We met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Charleston, somewhere no one from the Bennett family ever really visited. Perhaps that's why she chose it. When I arrived, she was already there. No heavy makeup, no designer clothes, just a woman in a plain white shirt and jeans, her expression tired more than proud. "Thanks for coming," she said first. I didn't respond, just sat down, arms folded. I won't justify what I did at the rehearsal dinner. It was wrong, deeply wrong. "Then why did you do it?" I asked. Not angry anymore, just curious. She took a deep breath. "Because I was jealous. That simple." That caught me off guard. I always thought she looked down on me. Turns out, it all started from a place of fear. "I'm the daughter," she said, eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. "I was the only one left living with Dad after Mom passed. I thought I would keep all that was hers, including the love she had for Mark, and the ring." I said nothing. I just listened. "But then he gave the ring to you." And more than that, he loved you, truly. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even our mother, maybe. You wanted to hurt me, I whispered. No, Rachel. She looked me in the eyes for the first time. I wanted to reclaim what I thought was mine, but I did it the wrong way, and I know I can't unsay what I said. But at the very least, I can own that I was wrong. There were no tears, no excuses, just a woman learning to grow through the damage she herself had caused. You're the one Mark deserves, she added. I saw that a long time ago, and I hated it, because I never had it. I nodded, not in forgiveness, but no longer in resentment. I stood up, ready to leave. Haley, I said, pausing by the door. Thank you for speaking the truth, but don't say I deserved anything. Say I never stole anything. I simply accepted what was offered. Through love, through effort, and through self-respect. She lowered her head. I stepped out of the cafe, the late afternoon sun slanting across the old stone steps. And I realized, not every wound can heal, but some scars, when truly acknowledged, stop aching. I thought things would settle down after my meeting with Haley. I had made peace with the truth, received the acknowledgement, told myself I could let go, but then, 3 days later, Mark showed up. This time, he didn't text, didn't call ahead. He just stood at the door of the temporary apartment I was renting, holding a thick envelope, his face calm. I didn't open the door right away. I looked through the peephole, and for the first time, Mark didn't look like the Mark I once knew. No tie, no perfectly slicked back hair, just a man, worn down, yes, but somehow lighter. I opened the door, said nothing. He held out the envelope. I quit, he said. Left my father's company. Yesterday was my last day. I froze. I never thought he would actually do that. A part of me always assumed he'd choose family, the heir to the boardroom role, the silence. I accepted an offer at a small financial firm in Brooklyn. He went on. Less pressure, no more client dinners with old men in golf pins. He smiled. For the first time in weeks, I saw him smile. Not the polite kind, but something real. And I got my own place, away from my parents, away from Haley, away from expectations I no longer want to meet. I leaned against the doorframe and realized I didn't know what to feel. Mark was doing the right thing. He was changing. He was becoming the man I had once begged him to be. But the hardest part was that I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. You may not believe it, he continued, but the days without you were the days I had to look in the mirror and finally face who I really was. I realized you've always been stronger than me, and all I ever did was lean on you. I never truly learned how to stand up for you. My chest tightened. There's a strange kind of ache in watching someone you loved grow, but not with you. I can't come back just because you've changed, I said softly. Because this isn't just about you and your father. It's about you and me, about your silence when I needed your voice the most. Mark nodded. I know. I didn't come to ask you to come back. I came to tell you, you were right, and I'm finally living right. Because of you. We sat in silence for a while. No hands held, no embrace. Just two people who once knew each other well, now sitting on separate paths. Before he left, Mark placed the engagement ring into my palm. He didn't say, "Wear it again." He only whispered, "Whether you ever come back or not, keep it as a reminder that you taught me how to become a better man." And then he walked away. No glance back. And this time, I was the one who watched. Until he disappeared from view. I closed my fingers around the ring. No more anger, no more hopes, just something that felt like peace. Because sometimes people change, not to win you back, but to make sure they don't fail someone else the way they failed you. Nearly 2 months had passed since Mark walked away from the threshold of my apartment. Life slowly returned to its steady rhythm. I went back to the hospital, took on night shifts again, and, in many ways, felt more like myself than I had in years. No more staying up at night wondering if a message would come. No more dresses hanging in wait for family dinners I never really belonged to. I moved in with Tara, my best friend from college, into a small house near the hospital. It had a little backyard, with just enough sun to grow basil, lavender, and sage. I started learning how to be Dill, how to make my own coffee instead of waiting for someone to bring it, how to smile when a little patient pronounced pneumonia correctly without help, how to wear the sapphire ring from Cynthia again, not on my ring finger, but on my middle one, as a reminder. Never place your worth in a spot that needs someone else's permission to shine. Then, one quiet Saturday afternoon, I stopped by a new cafe near the Central Library. I ordered a cappuccino and opened my book like I usually did. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "Rachel." I looked up. It was Mark. He was standing in front of me, holding a book titled The Psychology of Silence. I smiled. "Fitting choice," I said. He chuckled, not defensively. He looked different, a little thinner, but lighter somehow, like the weight of his family's legacy no longer pulled down his shoulders. We chatted for a few minutes, no tension, no forced laughter. He told me about his new job, about learning to cook and how he finally mastered lasagna. I told him about Charlotte, the youngest patient in my ward, who insisted on calling me Mom Nurse. Then I stood up to leave. As I reached the door, he gently touched my hand, soft, a touch that didn't try to hold me. "Rachel? Thank you," he said. I turned, looked him in the eye. "For what?" "For having the courage to walk away. For not forgiving too easily. For teaching me that the worth of a woman isn't defined by who she loves, but by whether she has the strength to love herself." I nodded, didn't say anything, but inside, I felt lighter. He smiled again. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I really am," I said. "And you?" He looked at me, then at the sunlight spilling through the window onto his hand. "For the first time in my life, I think I'm living for me, not for my dad, not for the legacy, just for me." I walked out of the cafe, coffee in hand. No looking back, no regret, no need to check if he watched me leave. Because I knew, whether someone stays or goes, the most important thing is this: I'm no longer the woman who waits in silence, hoping someone will stand up for her. I am the woman who stood up for herself. In the end, I realized that losing a relationship, even one you thought was forever, is never as terrifying as losing yourself. I used to believe that love, if strong enough, could overcome anything: family judgment, silence, even pride. But the truth is, love is never enough if it doesn't come with a clear, courageous choice. I had chosen to stay quiet, to shrink myself. I thought that if I were gentler, more patient, more willing to sacrifice, maybe I would be accepted. But eventually, I learned you should never have to make yourself smaller just to fit into a seat that was never meant for you. And when you finally stand up and walk away from that table, that's the moment you reclaim your worth. I don't blame Mark anymore. He wasn't a bad man. He was simply not ready to love me in the way I deserved. And I no longer resent Haley, because in her, I saw parts of many women who were never truly heard, and who hurt others just to feel seen. In the end, the biggest lesson I learned is that self-respect isn't arrogance. It's the boundary line of the heart. And when someone crosses it, even someone you love, you still have every right to say, "Enough, I deserve more than this." If you're listening to this and you've ever been in a relationship that made you feel like you had to earn your place, please remember, you don't have to become someone else's idea of acceptable to be loved. You don't have to hold on to a love just because you've invested so much time. And you're allowed to walk away, not because you gave up, but because you were brave enough to choose yourself. Maybe a happy ending isn't always a wedding. Maybe it's a little house with a sunlit garden. Maybe it's mornings where you make your own coffee. Maybe it's the quiet peace of not waiting for someone else's approval to feel worthy. And maybe, just maybe, the hero in your story was never anyone else at that table. It was you. The one who got up and walked away when the laughter turned into poison. It's been almost a year since that fateful night. The night I took off the ring and walked out of the party I once thought would mark the beginning of my married life. Today, I'm sitting on my front porch, holding a cup of peppermint tea I grew myself, watching the maple trees start to change color. The chair beneath me creaks gently in the early autumn breeze. Peaceful, completely peaceful. This house isn't big, but it's mine. There's no inheritance waiting, no grand toast when I signed the papers. Just one quiet, certain truth. I am living my life on my own terms. I've rehung the little paintings I once packed away because they didn't look elegant enough. I planted tomatoes, basil, and lavender out front. The kind Mark used to say were too much work to maintain. I've started writing again. Little journal entries. Pieces no one else will read, but that helped me hold on to the parts of myself I reclaimed after a year of unraveling. Mark and I still keep in touch. Now and then. No tension, no expectations. The last time we saw each other was at a public health event hosted by my hospital. He came with someone, a tall, soft-spoken woman with listening eyes. When we crossed paths, there was just a brief glance, a small smile. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Better than ever," I replied. And I truly meant it. He nodded. The Rolex he used to show off was gone. In its place was a worn cloth strap, simpler, more him. Before we parted, he said, "Thank you for being the first person who ever made me face myself." I smiled, didn't reply, because some thank yous don't need words, just the act of moving on. Endings don't always look like getting back together. Sometimes an ending is when you learn to no longer rely on someone else to define your worth. It's when you clean out the room full of old expectations, close the door that once made you shrink, and step into the sunlight, unafraid. Maybe there will be someone new. Maybe not. Maybe there's another love story ahead. Or maybe you'll write the next chapter of your life with the same hands that once trembled as you removed that ring. But one thing I know for sure: when you're brave enough to walk away from anything that demands you trade your self-respect, you don't just survive, you begin to truly live.